Hey everyone, it's Jeff with the Second Chance Podcast. Great episode coming up. It's with Tammy Cox. And Tammy and I connected. This is the first conversation that we'd had. We connected online. Um, and she had some things in her bio about just how she works with childhood trauma and helps folks overcome that. And I connected with her. She works, her main audience is women that are potentially going through failing marriages and headed down that path of divorce. But it was a conversation that intrigued me enough, just based on my background and some of my childhood experiences, and then things that I've dealt with in law enforcement, coaching, and everything. Really, really positive conversation. You're gonna hear us say a lot during this episode. You're probably gonna know someone who needs to hear it. This is one of those episodes. I say this every episode, but this is an episode to where you're probably going to know someone that's struggling with their own identity, struggling with where they are, and connecting them with Tammy may be the best course of action. And if you feel that, then please share this episode with them. Let me know what you think. Um, Thank you for liking, sharing, commenting. I appreciate it. The reviews you've left mean the world to me. I'm just a guy trying to have as many conversations with as many people as I can because the. Uh, I really enjoy people. So let me know what you think. Can't wait to hear from you, and you guys have a good one. All right, team, welcome back to the Second Chance Podcast, where we dive into stories of resilience, transformation, and the power of taking the second shot at life. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce a guest who's not only transformed her own life, but has made it her mission to help others do the same in their marriages. Tammy Cox is a transformational coach specializing in inner child healing, and she's here to share her powerful story of personal growth, healing, and how she saved her marriage from the brink of collapse. Through her coaching business, Reclaim Your Marriage, and her podcast, Behind the Veil, Tammy is guiding women to heal themselves first without needing their husband's immediate involvement. She helps them uncover the deep rooted wounds that lead to disconnection, guiding them toward love, intimacy, and deeper connections in their relationships. Tammy's work is all about starting from within and reprogramming old patterns to create a stronger, more loving foundation. We'll dive into her personal journey, the challenges she faced, and how she helps others navigate their own relationship transformations. So, let's welcome Tammy Cox to the Second Chance Podcast. Welcome, Tammy.
Well, thank you, Jeff. That was a beautiful introduction. Loved it.
Yes, I've been rehearsing. I've been rehearsing. Uh, Thank you. I can't wait to dive into this. And I'm the dude. I'm over here, so I get to learn more about perspective. And you're just everything that we're going to talk about. I've been reading about your bio and just different things, and I'm excited to learn more.
Cool. Let's do it.
Your second chance in life came through your marriage. Can you walk us through the moment you realized things had to change, and what was your first step toward healing?
Yeah, it was all around my marriage, basically because think about the most intimate relationship we have, the relationship where we share a room, a house, finances, children, everything with this one person. They are the closest mirror. And every relationship in our life is a reflection of the one we have with ourselves. And so for me, the pain point was my marriage. In my perception, I perceived my husband as not loving me. But in actuality, I had a deep rooted belief that I was unlovable. So I actually couldn't allow him to love me because of this belief. And so that was my biggest pain point, and it's why it's been my focus in my business. However, the real second chance for me was healing myself. That was the real second chance. And so for me, when I became a wife and a mom was when all my triggers started sounding off. I thought I was good. I thought, I'm doing this life thing. My past is behind me. But when I became a wife and when I became a mom, I started bugging out. And that was because I had all this past trauma from my childhood that came up to the surface. And I had been able to kind of keep it down. But once I was faced with these very intimate relationships, I could no longer run from the inner pain that I had. These wounds, they just started like bleeding everywhere. And so it was my call. It was my call to, I made a decision. I said, I can't live like this. I'm either going to take my life or I'm going to heal myself. And obviously, as I sit here today, you know the decision I made.
Yeah.
But I had to face everything within me that was holding me back from the life that I truly desired. And for me, that pain point was the relationship I had with my husband.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why my heart really goes to the women who kind of have exhausted all their options. They've done counseling, they've done religion, they've done the retreats, they have done the books, and it's doesn't really work. It's like a temporary band-aid, and then all their shit comes up. And so for me, that's what it was. And it wasn't until I started going within and neutralizing my trauma and healing those inner wounds of that little girl inside of me that I started to transform. And then my husband
Tell
did, and my
us,
kids.
yeah, tell us about that. Like what you got, we're healing. We're going to, like, what role did healing that inner child play in transforming, and um, how does this concept help others experiencing similar struggles?
Well, if there is anything that you don't want in life, it will always go back to the beliefs that you hold in your subconscious mind. So, for instance, in my line of work, we call them commands. It's the limiting beliefs that are so big because they came in at a very young age, and they're stamped onto your subconscious mind, and they're essentially running the show for your life. And I
Yeah.
tell people this all the time, my two strongest ones, because I feel like it allows people to kind of search in their mind for theirs. And it was, I'm unlovable and I'm not important. And when I looked at my life, all the places where these commands came up, it was all over my life. It was in every single relationship. So in my friendships, I had all these defense mechanisms to kind of push people away, because the second they told me that they loved me, they're liars. I can't trust them
Yeah.
anymore. Right. So until we realize that these deep coded beliefs are hindering us from having the thing that we really want, it's just band-aid. So we really got, that's why I'm big on finding the root cause, which is those beliefs. And I don't like to float around on the surface, because all of our actions, all of our results in our life can be tracked back to our belief system within the identity.
Tammy, do you ever talk about where that came from with you?
Oh yeah.
Uh, tell us, tell us about your childhood, and
Yeah.
where did some of these impressions come from?
So I grew up in a home, like my dad was I grew up in a very violent home.
Yeah.
Physical violence was a normal part of my daily life. My dad was physically abusive. He was very aggressive. He scared the absolute shit out of me. Um, and also there was a lot of religious trauma. So, my dad was very legalistic in the religion we were brought up in. And there was I wasn't allowed to think for myself. I wasn't allowed to be my own person. I had to fit his description of who I got to be. And if I didn't follow that, there would be a physical punishment. And it was very sinister, the way, it was very sinister. So I have a developmentally delayed sister who's older than me. And just the violence in my home, it was just not like anything you've ever probably experienced. And so when it came to integrating into the world, I had a really hard time because it I would go to school and put my hands on people and they'd be like, "You can't do that." And so I'd be very confused because for me that was such a normal thing, right? And so then fast forward to age 11, and that was when I found out that my dad was dying of AIDS. 1 month later, he was gone. They didn't give us much time, even though he had, HIV for many, many years. It was like the big family secret, right? So they finally tell us, and we're like, okay, I'm 11. I don't understand death at all. I'm like, okay, there's this disease, cool. Um, then he passes, and if you know anything about a child's development in those years, which my siblings and I were all age 9, I was 11, and my sister was 13. Terrible years to go through something like that. And so it wasn't till age 13 that I realized my dad was gone and he wasn't coming back. I didn't understand death, right?
Yeah.
And when this hit, this was when I really started struggling because first of all, I missed my dad, right? I loved him. I had a deep love for him. But at the same time, I was relieved
Yeah.
because he scared me so bad, right? So here, and then I felt guilty that I felt relieved. So I was so messed up for all my teen years. I was bitter. I was angry. I had so much unforgiveness. And 19, I believe, was the time where I really, because I had certain times in my life, I'd say 13 to 14, and then around 19. And then once I became a mom, I had these times where it was just like massive lows where I would even, say suicidal, where I started to come up with these plans and stuff. But 19 was this point where I was just like, I was done with being so angry and resentful, and I was done with being a victim. And that's when I think I started my healing journey, although it kind of just went like this in waves, right? And so then when I was, I became a mom at 26, and that's when, your full frontal lobe is fully developed at 25. So then again, this new reality kind of hits you and you're like, oh shoot, like, and then I was petrified of creating the same patterns.
Yeah.
You know, I was so petrified of becoming my dad. And so I think that was a really big driving force to my healing journey too, is that I didn't want to hurt my kids the way I was hurt.
Same. So husband comes in, same husband that we've had.
Yeah.
Yep, same husband. So, right. So,
Mm-hmm.
so
Yep.
someone who's partnered with you on this journey,
18 years.
along the way, right? Can't wait to have him on, her, whatever that looks like. But I can't wait to have the spouse on to hear their side. I totally understand. I grew up more in gun violence, rural. And the part when you said really scared about passing it on, I just always had reckless and destructive behaviors. That's what my wife will tell you. Like, yeah, he was pretty destructive, right? So I have a shirt that I wear that's reckless behavior. It's my reminder of those moments. And I was terrified when I found out I was going to be a dad. That I did not. Um, want them to have to experience anything remotely like I experienced. And I um, was fortunate I was older, probably. I think I was about 10 years older than you as kids start coming along to me. And she's such a amazing person that really helped me process all that stuff. Even to this
Mm.
day, she doesn't fully understand because she grew up
Opposite,
different.
probably.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of going to ask. Is this
Mm-hmm.
your husband? What is their upbringing? Just for perspective, so we because I had the opportunity, like there's relationships, you can either be oil and water or you can be oil and oil, and it can either work or it doesn't sometimes. And sometimes I had relationships to where we were too much alike and we were too much in conflict. But
Hmm.
how was that for you?
So yeah, that's interesting because my husband and I have a lot of similarities and yet we're very different. So
Yeah.
he, like me, lost his father when he was a child. We both had the experience of we're the second of four. I have an older sister and two younger brothers. He has an older brother and two younger sisters. So very similar that way. Um, our moms moved on very quickly after our dads passed. We had uh, a stepdad that came in quickly, and that added another component to our
Yeah.
distress. We both have issues from that too. So there's a lot that we have in common. However, we're very different as well.
Yeah.
I am more of the driver personality, so I have more of the controller within me, and he is more supporter within our relationship. My husband was law enforcement for 15 years. And of course, I attracted that because what triggers me is someone withdrawing from me, which is what he does when he's triggered. So we would trigger each other. I get triggered, I become like a little kid with a temper tantrum, and that would scare him and he would hide, right? He would get small, he would hide, he would get the hell out, right? And so we would just go in these circles triggering each other, right? And part of why I didn't perceive he loved me, I wasn't safe for him and he wasn't safe for me. So that was kind of part of my healing journey too, where I changed and therefore he changed with me because you're one unit, you're so spiritually bound that your energies are just, they're all intermingled. So yes, we do tend to attract our opposite, and it can work out, but it can also be a painful thing. Like, I believe that we are partnered with who we're with in order to grow us. And so I had to learn. I didn't even perceive for myself that I was unsafe for him. I didn't even see my own behavior, right? And I don't think any
Yeah.
of us do before we start our healing journey. And so, like your wife, you attracted her because she was the perfect fit to like sort of nurture you and give you that safe place for you to be honest with her, right? But for a lot of years, my husband and I, we were just so unhealthy to each other. And yeah, did I
You said
answer
he's a
your
police
question?
officer, right?
He was,
Yep,
yes.
he was. Yep. So, um, easy to hide these moments and behind everybody else's problems. I was there. I did police work as
Yeah.
well. It's really easy for us to take those childhood moments, and we'll speak about him for a second, and then how we. When he comes home, Tammy, he's gonna come home and tell you about his day, and you go, "Well, my problems aren't bad as those," and you typically just put like, "Whoa, if that's how bad it is out there, I'm really happy I have this really what I call my screwed up life." And it takes you longer to really address some of those things, I think.
Well, my husband didn't do that. He didn't
Good.
talk to me. It wasn't necessarily good. He was very shut down. It
I
was,
got you. So
it
I got
was,
you. I got you. Got you.
he
Got you.
went the other way where
Yeah.
we kind of led different lives for a lot of years, where he was like, I'll do my thing, you kind of do your thing, we'll kind of co-parent little, but
Yeah.
it was very disconnected.
That's man, this is all right. So this is why I said I wanted to talk to you because I have this commonality when I was reading your bio. I was like, well, and your childhood trauma stuff. And I've worked hard with myself and finding those triggers. So, folks, if you're listening and everyone's listening to this, is yes, this is set up to be one sided, but Tammy didn't know that I had this whole journey that I've worked on personally as well. And I enjoy just hearing about how this all evolved for her and the things, because when you talk about triggers, once I learned what triggers me and how I could process those triggers, and some of them I avoid altogether, is once I realized my triggers, then things started really taking shape for me in a positive way. And that's
Mm.
a lot of what I wanted to talk to you about as well. But you coach women to take responsibility for their personal healing without relying on their husbands to change first. How do you do that?
I basically say, sweetheart, put on your blinders. I'm gonna get a little southern on you.
You've
Sweetheart, put on your blinders.
been
I'm gonna
talking to me for 20 minutes and you already sound like me, Tammy. This is
I
great.
know. I know. It's but I just tell him, I say, listen, I'm going to ask you to ignore him for the next 12 weeks because usually it's 12 to 6 months. I'd say it's better if it's a year, but I say this is going to, I know you think it's him. We all do. When we come into our healing journey, we swear it's them. It's everyone else. It's not me.
Yeah.
But and I let them think that until they get in. And then I'm like, okay, let's look at these patterns here. If it, if we see if we look at these patterns and we put them under a microscope and we look at your triggers and we look at your traumas and we start taking that deep inner look, they very soon realize I created all of it. And some people take longer to get there than others. It is that moment that I look for with my clients where they finally have that aha of like, I made all this up. I made all the stories up. Like I created this. And it's very hard for people to get to that place because our ego can feel so strong. Our ego, meaning that little broken child inside of us who's just screaming and in pain, right? But when I teach them how to nurture and love that little child, they soon have a very different perspective. And when I started doing that, then I started doing it with my husband. I started to see that little boy within him that was just in pain. You can't be mad at that. You can't be mad. You have to know that there's a reason why I was paired with you, that I chose you. There's a reason on a very deep level that's not really being seen until you really dig in deep inside of yourself. So I just tell them we're going to ignore everyone else for just a little bit. And we're going to go inside you and we're going to figure out why you created this and what that little child within you needs now.
Yeah. That's and what is your experience? Because I'm curious, just in that unresolved trauma, um, you know, is there an aha moment? Does people realize how bad that's affecting? Because I didn't know how bad it was affecting me. I went on to do police work. I did a lot of cool things, but ultimately, I did. And as I started kind of going back and looking at self destruction, it was a lot of the stuff that I just hadn't dealt with from here. I just put it up. I'll deal with it later. Deal with it later. How does that? How do they discover you and your work? Because I've worked in a long time to really just through self discovery and some other things, and you like me stumbling across you, Tammy, is it? So at what point does someone you hope find you, and is there a realization, or if their marriage is tanking and they don't know, what is that moment when you're like, I really wish they would find me now?
Mm. Typically, they are on the brink of divorce.
Yeah.
They have exhausted all options. They really love their spouse. They don't really want to end it, but they don't know how to fix it. But this is the last resort. And they're afraid they're going to lose their business because, a divorce can be can be a destruction of life. It's like
Yeah.
100K lifelong cost of a divorce. And so they're really looking at that. They're like, should I get a divorce or should I try this one last thing? And it's just they're in massive pain is what it is, because they don't really want to let go of the marriage. They want their family to stay together. They see the value in marriage, but at the same time, they just don't know what the hell to do. And oftentimes they don't have any idea that it goes back to childhood trauma and the first 5 years of their life. Oftentimes they don't. They just know that they're in a lot of pain, they need help, and they're desperate.
What would you say was the hardest part of your own healing journey?
Mm. The hardest part was taking radical, 100% responsibility for everything that I had created.
Yeah.
It was the hardest and then it was the easiest because once you realize that you made it all up, you then have the opportunity to create the new story. But
Yeah.
you have to get to that place where you can accept it and say, okay, it is what it is. Like, this is just how it's done. I made it up. I created it. But the ego just goes, oh, because blame is this huge, really low vibrational, emotional presence within us. We carry around this shame, and it is just like, for us to take responsibility feels like we're saying, you're right, I am a total piece of shit.
Yeah.
When actuality, when you release the shame and you say, I created it, I'm letting go, I'm forgiving myself. Forgiveness is a huge part of the healing journey.
Yeah. I like that.
We just, like, I can't say it enough. If we don't forgive completely and wholly and break up with the negative past, then we cannot create the new thing. Just, we can't do it.
Yeah.
So, forgiveness and then taking radical responsibility, owning it all.
Forgiving yourself. And I talked to someone about this a couple times in the last few days of just they don't realize how, and folks, if you're listening, you don't realize what a superpower of not forgiving everybody else. That's easy, right? In some worlds, sometimes it's easy to forgive everybody else because you just like, hey, you talk to forgive. But forgiving yourself is a whole different animal. And then once you embrace that and you can figure that out, it is like putting an S on your chest and kicking all the kryptonite out. It is so liberating when you finally forgive yourself. I was going to ask you too. I'm curious. You're also 11 years old at the pinnacle of all this. How much did you really like? Part of this is you being a kid, Tammy, and how does is a little bit of I guess I want to tell you what's on my mind and what happened to me. And finally, I had to tell family like they would bring up certain stuff or whatever. And finally, I just raised my hand one day and I told everybody like I was a kid. You guys were taking for granted. I was trying to grow up in all of this chaos, and y'all think that it's easy for me, and it wasn't. What is your like? Did you ever have that moment where you're like, I was a kid. I didn't ask for any of this.
Yeah. I mean, yes and no. One component of that, like, my dad's dead. And the other one was my mom, who was a very great support to me. Like, it was hard for her to hear about what we went through, but she already felt so bad about it. When you have a parent that's just like, she didn't want any of this for her kids. Like, when I empathize, now that I'm a mom, when I empathize to how much I can now look back and be like, my mom freaking tried so hard to protect us from all the pain that the man she chose
Yeah.
put us through. She held on to a lot of shame about that. So it wasn't, even though I can talk to her about it, I can tell her how I feel. The second I see her just get so sad about it, I'm just like, but we only know what we know. Like, we do our best. We really do in the moment. But when we have these patterns, like, my mom also had an abusive dad. It was normal for her. She didn't even know my dad was abusive. Oh, men aren't supposed to hold you up by your neck. Like, she did not know because that was her experience growing up. And so we have all these patterns and we get to extend grace because we're all doing the pattern that we were programmed with
I,
until
I
until we choose not to.
Yeah, I speak to that, calling it breaking curses.
Yeah.
I
The
have the shirt.
generational
I have the
curse.
shirt.
Yep.
I have the shirt. It's on the back, and then I got stickers that I hand
I
out for
love that.
everyone that comes. I'm like, and it's breaking curses, winning your day, and learning. Like your mom, she was doing what she thought she knew, and because it had been passed on to her. And if we not, that's easy to do. You could easily be doing the same thing right now,
Mhm.
and hey, this is the way it is. Me and my mom had a not an argument, but she said that one time. But I was like, there's just a lot of dysfunction growing up, and she's like, well, that's the way it was, and I'm like, whoa, the way it was for us. The rest of the world, it wasn't, but this is the way it was for us, and
Mhm.
and yeah, breaking those curses is a big deal. How
She
do you
does
go ahead?
she sorry, can I ask you a question?
Yeah,
Did
absolutely.
she own it, any of it?
We still struggle with that,
See,
Tammy.
that's what it is,
Yeah,
right? So with my mom, it's not that she it was hard for her to own it initially because it was so heartbreaking for her, but after a while she saw all three of her kids just bugging out. Like she
yeah.
couldn't deny that we were all severely traumatized by our childhood. She couldn't deny it, um, but over time, and me just I just shared my heart with her over and over again. I said, "Mom, this is not blame. You were following your patterns, but there were times where it was hard for her to own it, but overall, she said like whatever my kids need to heal, I'm doing it." So
Oh,
she came
yeah,
to that place, but I think the hard part for you is having a parent that doesn't own it. Like that's and I have a lot of clients like that whose parents are like, "La la 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 la. That's normal. La la la." And that's their experience and it can be hard to accept because the only thing you ever want from your parent is to like love you and validate you and hear you and support you. So that could be really hard.
it's and she just doesn't want to. She doesn't. Sometimes she just doesn't want to acknowledge the chaos because she did survive her own. She's a survivor in her own way,
Mhm.
and she doesn't want to recognize. And because everybody's passed on now, most of her siblings and but her my grandparents they're passed on. And so, like, what's in her world, I think what's done is done, and there's no reason to tell your family business, which is kind of how we was while we grew up. I enjoy the conversations because I realized at a very old age of what my triggers were. And I enjoy like now I go back and like, hey, if you got some stuff I worked through some stuff as a kid. I grew up in gun violence when people didn't know what gun violence was. The difference between rural gun violence and urban gun violence is rural gun violence is when someone shoots, they think it's a good thing that they're protecting or they're doing something. I'm like, it's not always the case.
But
Um,
you know what you're doing, Jeff, that's so beautiful? Like you are in on the beginning part of this journey where you are allowing the masculine to heal by
yeah.
talking about these things. So like, you know, that was the big problem that I saw within our police department. Every time we had a shooting within our police department, there were there were divorces that followed very quickly. And they wouldn't talk about it. And I'm like, these guys have such massive PTSD. They should have mandatory trauma healing that they're doing. They are just like men that go to war. You have not been given the faculties of mind to shoot and kill your own species.
Yeah.
You've not been given that. So the trauma that any first responder experiences, you got to be getting some treatment because when you study the scans of a brain of someone who goes through that kind of a job. So I just thank you on behalf of the world that you are making this, you're bringing it to the masculine because
Yeah.
that's what needs
Appreciate
to
it.
be awakened. You know, the feminine has, you know, we've been on this journey for a minute and we've been waiting for the masculine to get in touch with their emotions and start healing their their wounds so that we can grow together.
Yeah. You do. It's it's I was like my mom. It's a conversation I was afraid to have just for fear of embarrassment and all the other things that come with that. And then as time went on, and just getting into fitness and being a business owner and being a coach and being someone that has a platform, has an audience that I could reach. I really saw the opportunity to just start talking about it more, and I didn't want to. I don't want to throw shade at anyone, but I think if there's what I realized was there was a lot of people who grew up I had friends that was getting abused, like just whipped with a belt, right? They may get whipped, and they would come to a school, um, limping because they would talk about how their dad was a little rough on them, because they forgot to do something or he didn't do anything, and that was what parenting was. So when I would hear that a lot of times, I would be like, "Well, I ain't got to deal with that. Ain't nobody beating on me." Um, and I didn't deal with a lot, very little physical abuse. My grandfather threw hot coffee on me one time, and some other things out of
Mm.
just being drunken rage BS, but nothing like. So again, for the folks that are listening to that is your situation's your situation.
Mhm.
Not it doesn't make someone else's worst situation doesn't need to overshadow yours. Your situation is still yours, and you can deal with it.
Well, I find the problem is I've have a lot of women that come to me and they're like, "I don't have any trauma." I'm
Yeah,
like, "Sweetheart, we all have trauma. You may not have my kind of trauma. You may have, but but our perception, what we have to understand is the perception of that little child within you saw it a certain way.
yeah,
And trauma is just a high state of negative emotion. And it's meant to keep us safe. Like it's a good thing. But once we don't need it, we get to heal it and move on. If you don't deal with it, you try and like, for instance, we keep the emotions that we don't emote, particularly the negative ones, they stay in our body and they fester and they fester and they fester. And that's what I experience, the festering of those old wounds. And so even if your wounds are smaller, I'll do that in quotes, smaller,
yeah.
they are not. We all have experienced it. And so if you're not living the life of your dreams, I promise you, you have unresolved inner child wounds. So it just is what it is. They, like I said, it doesn't have to be a war. It doesn't have to be an accident. It doesn't have to be a beating even. Like a
Yeah.
child can perceive a simple correction, a spanking. When I did my trauma treatment, these spankings, which are, they were, they, whatever, they came
Yeah.
up, right? It's like you can't deny that when my dad thought he was doing the best thing in his mind, he was doing the best thing for us. And compared to what he went through, it was nothing. And
Yeah.
he told us that what he was doing, he thought he was doing a great job. So I can't, I have no fault knowing what he went through in his childhood. It's just about me healing my lineage so that my kids don't get what I got, and we can kind of dilute it. We can dilute that poison a little more with each generation. Hopefully a lot.
Yeah, you touched on, I'm curious, taking the husband out of the process for 12 weeks. Is that well received? Is that nervous? But what is, how does that, how do you think that affects just the overall transformation by removing the husband and just focusing on the wife?
I mean, ideally for ideal results, she's working on herself, he's working on his.
Yeah.
Ideal results. But that doesn't tend to happen in relationships, does it? Like we're not always on the same page at the same time. And people are under this really false belief that you need both people to shift at one time in
Yeah.
order to change. You don't. When I changed, when I transformed, think about it like this. We used to fight constantly. We always bickered. When he didn't have someone to fight with because she just wasn't there anymore, how do you think that affected the relationship? When
Oh,
she was no longer blaming him, when she was no longer in his face, when she was no longer looking to him to fulfill something within her, but she was looking within herself. Tell me how that won't change the dynamic of a relationship. I'm not going I said this to my husband. I said, you are now and forever off the hook, forever making me happy. For I know the happiness does not come outside of me, but it comes from deep within me. And so I'm not going to put that on you because no one can do that for me. Right? It's a
yeah.
complete shifting of one person, which changes the whole. Like, same with my family life. Everyone in my household shifted because I shifted.
That's awesome. I like the way you, like, everyone shifted with you. Um, do you see patterns when or common patterns when your clients are coming into you? Do you see common patterns that in across a lot of the marriages that you see? And then do you see patterns, or is it each individual its own uniqueness?
I mean, yes, there are patterns. I tend to attract women that are probably because I'm a controller, a driver, I tend to attract women that are high supporters,
Yeah.
which means their husbands are more of the controllers. And the thing about supporters is they kind of see themselves as more of a victim. So they're pointing their finger at him saying, fix him. He's the problem. He's the problem. He's the problem. And I have to try and convince her that it ain't him,
Yeah.
you know? And so that's a big pattern I see.
When there's a level, and here's two people, you know, in our world, millions upon millions of people is going to consume this content, and there's a we're stepping into the public eye with which is a very private story sometimes. Um, Stepping into the public eye and sharing your story has been a challenge. How do you push through, and how do we encourage that these folks that need your services or that should be coming in and speaking with you to work through that discomfort? And do you have advice for others sharing trying that are struggling to share that truth?
Yeah. I find that in order for a person to change, they got to be in enough pain. That's where I was at. I was in so much pain that I said, I'm either taking my life or I'm
Yeah.
healing it. There's nothing in between because I can't live another second like this. So I sort of feel like before a woman takes such a massive step, she's got to be in a lot of freaking pain, unfortunately. Um, However, that's when there's this beautiful time, opportunity, I'll say, opportunity to transform because you're just like, if you're like I was, like, I can't live another day as this thing that I've been, this person, this identity that I've been because I am in so much pain. It offers you this opportunity to step up and say, I'm worth it. Like my life is worth helping. So yeah, there is a lot of shame around like I'll have people reaching out privately and they want to keep it under wraps as much as possible, which is why I have my podcast Behind the Veil. It's anonymous. That just creates more shame. The reason why I tell my story, I tell, I hear from a lot of podcasters. They're like, you are so raw and honest. And it's like, yeah, because that's what freed me of my shame. When I
Yeah.
brought it into the light and said, here it all is. Okay. Here's all the shadows that exist within me. Here it is. It's so freeing when you could be that authentically you say, this is what I've experienced, this is where I'm at now. So if you're hiding in that shame cycle, I highly advise you to come into the light. You're really going to like it. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be uncomfortable to heal. It is. I'm not going to lie to you. But the freedom you feel in your body and the love and the joy that I now have, the peace is so worth it to me. It's like I would have paid $1 million. I would have,
Yeah.
I can't even tell you how delicious it is. So
It's just priceless.
if I could just tell you that on the other side of the pain that you're in right now is everything that you want. And it's more than the exterior things. It is the deep love that comes from deep within you.
Is how I appreciate that, and I think it speaks volume. How do we convince them to start? What is your message and that advice that they're at their breaking point, and they just don't know where to start? What is that? What is that moment of taking action that you could tell someone?
I think they have to get to the place where they find they're self-worthy of having
Yeah.
what they want and knowing that it's possible, right? If you don't believe that something's possible or you don't believe you're worthy of having it, that you could never step into it. So you have to just accept if you exist, that's because all that is needs you in order to be the all that is. So if you exist, it's not on accident. You could never cease to exist. So get over the idea that you could. And then just understand that your worthiness is a God-given right. It is, I'm sorry, you can deny it all you want, but you just are so freaking worthy. So if I could instill anything into human beings, humanity, is that you are so worthy of having every single thing that you desire. And the only thing standing in the way is bogus beliefs that you adopted very early. And just
Yeah.
take one tiny step. Like I tell people, if you take one tiny step each day, what would your life look like in a week of just tiny steps, 2 weeks, tiny steps, tiny steps, tiny steps towards you, um, towards finding that inner peace. But for me, what I encourage other people to do, I always have a mentor. I always have someone, many that I'm mentoring, and then someone who's mentoring me. Someone's got to pour into my cup in order for me to pour into others. So find someone that can pour into you. It could be on YouTube. It could be a podcast, for instance,
Yeah.
something pouring into you that you could take a little action on. And that's the key. Take action. So if I tell you, go home and start journaling and releasing your unforgiveness, writing out everything you're letting go of right here in this moment. I like to do this once a day at night. I just forgive everything from that day. I just forgive and release it, forgive and release it, forgive and release it. But take one action step each day. Pour into yourself, take one action step, because you're letting your subconscious know, hey, I'm agreeing to this and I'm putting it into action. That's telling your subconscious mind that you're shifting your beliefs. And so any little step you could do, but don't do nothing. Because if you do nothing different, then nothing will change in your life.
Yeah. Doing nothing does nothing.
Does nothing.
I think the only thing I would add, once you make a little bit of realization that you're inside of this moment, is is some temporary boundaries and just change of routine to where you're not
Mhm.
influenced by the same folks, because some of this stuff is coming in
Oh,
from family. Some of
yes.
this, some yeah. So just
Oh, yes,
getting a
that's a good
boundary in
one.
place. Yeah. What did you say, Tim?
I said that's a good one. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many pieces to the work that I do with my clients, but boundaries is a big one.
Yeah.
If you leave an interaction with someone not feeling good every single time you interact with them, then it's time to put some boundaries in place. And there might be and especially I tell everyone, there is no one that is going to be able to take my peace from me. I guard it like nothing else. I guard my peace because that is my gift that I get to give the world. Remember, we're a living example. Once we obtain these higher frequencies, because we've let go of the anchors that have held us in those lower levels, what happens is we rise up. And as we rise up, we're magnets, right? And
Yeah.
so it is your God-given duty to guard your peace. So yes, those boundaries are very important. And it's about being very aware of your emotional state. If you leave, start tracking it. Every time I leave this person's presence, they're always complaining. That's something I just will not listen to. You want to complain? You might as well find someone else. Because I am not going to be the one to listen to your complaints. Even with my clients, they'll come in, I'll be like, no, we're not complaining. This is about you, right? And so boundaries, love it.
It's a big one. Just to get the breather, because if not, you're still in the same. You're in the same settings. You're in the same surroundings. If you can just press pause on that and allow yourself to experience a little bit of life without it, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it'll really open up your discovery process on what's been driving you bonkers and
Mm-hmm.
the negative influence. Tell
Yeah.
me, on your podcast, Behind the Veil, you dive into people's personal healing journeys, and I think it's anonymous, is what you had
Mm-hmm.
mentioned. But is there a particular story that resonates with you that you could share? Or
Hmm. Gosh, I've gotten some very interesting ones. Lots of abuse. Let's see, what's one? I'd say one lady had just this whole trail of abuse. And she said some things. The abuse was not just to her, it was also towards her kids. And um, when I took her back, because what I do is I kind of we deal with the one if because it's obviously an hour, right? I say I'm gonna take you as deep as I can in this hour. So we're gonna target the one thing that the most negative thing that's been driving your life. And so she had this massive line of abuse, went all the way back to her childhood. And so I said, find this in your body. Where is it at? This is kind of my process. And, what color is it? And then notice that there is a image connected to this color reflecting out from you of your first experience with this emotion. Take me to it. And so then I have them take it to me, describe everything in order to neutralize it. This is one of my processes to neutralize the trauma. And it's so interesting because when, you come from an abusive home and you think, oh, the event that started this must have been like just awful, because the things that this woman went through and allowed a man to do to her children, you're just like, oh, the event she takes me to is going to be just grotesque. But it actually wasn't. And that's why I tell people that trauma is tricky. What you think of doesn't affect you, it really does. And I'll tell you, with my relationship with money, when I tracked that back, I said, okay, we're going back to the first event that created this idea about money. And it was the Christmas after my dad died. When my dad was alive, we didn't have much money. We were kind of poor. Once he died, because my mom got money from the government, all of a sudden we had things we didn't have before. So I wake up on Christmas morning, I see all these presents under the tree, and I was so happy for a split second.
Yeah.
And then comes the belief you have to lose someone you love in order to have more money. And that freaking belief ran my life. And it wasn't even a trauma, as in this, it was just a belief that came in at a moment and tracked all throughout my life. And this is what I mean. The amount of money you make, the relationships, meaning friendships, romantic relationships, your children, your relationship to all of life is because of the beliefs that you developed in those first 5 years. And I could track anyone back with any emotional state like this. Yeah.
That's your podcast, is that on YouTube, or where can folks find that?
Well, we're getting ready to launch, so it will be on. We're actually launching it this week, so it will be on YouTube. But I'd say I'm going to have a lot of the links that because I do all the platforms, but I
Yeah.
have my strongest presence on Instagram.
Yeah, I got you.
So I'll probably be posting those episodes there and links and whatnot, plus my link tree. I'll have
Yeah,
a link
no,
tree.
I wanna I wanna make sure, I wanna check it out myself, but then I also I wanna make sure that everyone can find it, because it sounds like it's just going to be some powerful stuff.
It is.
I'm excited. I got some road trips coming up, and I'm excited to just kind of tune in and listen to that. Do you, will you take a second as we wrap up here and just tell everyone how they can connect with you? The
Yeah.
standard, but just, and folks, listen, I'm giving you a second here to grab your pen, your pencil, your phone, your device, so you can type this in, because to tell me somebody that I have this just feeling that there's thousands of people right now that need to connect with Tammy, because I
Mm-hmm.
know where you are. I've worked around and amongst a lot of you, so let's take advantage of this. So, Tammy, how can folks best get in
Yeah.
touch with you?
I also want to say one more thing, which is I'm expanding out to not only married women, but women looking for love.
Yeah, that's good.
Because what I found is it's the same. They have the
Yep.
same issues.
Yeah.
Whether or not you haven't been able to find it, haven't been able to keep it, or you're in a marriage and it's falling apart, relationships that don't work, any of that, it is the same work. And so I've been doing that with my podcast too, not just married women, but women looking for love. And that's been really interesting too.
I
So,
bet. Yeah.
um, all relationships all go back to the same thing, which is your relationship with you. So, reach out if you want to be on the podcast. It's completely free to be on the podcast. If you want to be on the podcast, please reach out to me, because we are always looking for new beautiful souls that want to go through a transformation. But like I said, if you really want to get a hold of me and touch with me, can I provide you with my link tree? If I've been talking to you this whole time, please reach out to me. I do a 20-minute assessment if you want to get on the phone and see if you'd be a good fit for any of my programs. And then also, if you just want to chat, maybe you have a question, reach out to me on Instagram, Tammy Cox 7 on Instagram, or you can email me privately from my link tree, or you can book a discovery call, like I was telling you about. So those are
Um,
probably the easiest ways to get in touch with me.
and we're going to backlink all those like most folks should, but we'll make sure that those are in our show notes. And then I publish a blog that accompanies each episode as well. So, but regardless of how you're going to find it, is making the link tree will be on that blog, and it'll be inside of our show notes as well. And I think in my world, I think we just scratched a little bit of the surface, because like I shared with you, I was more than excited when I saw your bio, just someone I wanted to talk with that had experienced something similar. I think sometimes I tell my friend Bryce Henson is folks like us tend to migrate to each other just because of how we was raised, right? This
Yep.
is how we was raised. We tend to folks that have been through a little bit of extra hell tend to find each other in
Yeah.
life. Um,
Well,
so
I
I
mean, and we attract not people that have just gone through hell, but have pulled themselves out of hell into heaven on earth, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Because I have no interest in hanging out with people that are still in that victim mentality
Yeah.
that I lived in for a long time. And you, sir, are no victim.
Yep. You kind of teed me up for what I was going to say, and that's exactly that we're not put here to be miserable. We're not on earth to live a life of misery and sadness and unhappiness. And sometimes we find ourselves there, and you'll throw your hands up and just say, well, this is the life that I was dealt. And that's not true. And if you're throwing your hands up and resolving yourself to that, is Tammy's someone who and I'll say this, is don't take advice from people, love advice, whatever you're looking at here, from people who don't know what they're talking about. And Tammy's someone who has by all means the background of herself and her upbringing and the her own personal journey, and we can call that personal hell for
Yes,
a period of
it
time
was.
that she is healed from. And when you have that person that you can go and learn from, I can't encourage you enough. And when you can take advice from someone who's walked in the shoes and traveled the path that she has, I really encourage you to do it. Just because I see so many people, and I'll sit down and talk with them, and they're like, "Oh no, I had a perfect life, and I did this, and I just wanted to help people." And I'm like, "How many fist fights you ever been in?" They're like, "None." I'm like, "Yeah, you're not for me. I'm sorry. I like somebody who's a little,
I
who's got a
mean,
story."
and you just have to wonder, like, I hear people say all the time, I didn't realize that I was so raw and honest, but like I've heard it so much since I started doing podcasts, people really highlighting that about me. And I started to think about it, like, why am I like that? And that's when I figured out that shame piece of it. The first time I got on a stage with a microphone and told these very intimate things, like I
Yeah.
could not, this was like the beginning of my journey. I was just bawling and shaking. um, but the more times you say it, you're freeing yourself from the shame of just living it silently within yourself, it is just so delicious, the freedom that comes. And we all just think that our past and the negative things that happen to us should be covered up and forgotten about. Like, I can relate, Jeff, when you said, your family with the secrets. That was my family.
Yeah.
Secrets, secrets, secrets. I came from generations of, you know, religious, and I'll say religious and sort of like the controlling toxic religion where, you paint the face, you paint pretty picture on it, but behind closed doors, it was just toxic, and there were so many lies within my family. I'm like, these lies are dirty. Like, it just feels gross. And so, it's been hard for me as the trailblazer. I speak out publicly, with my story, and yet I have family that probably hate that I'm airing out the dirty laundry. And it's
Yeah.
just like, this is my truth. And it's okay if you don't agree with what I'm doing, but this is what healing means to me. And the more I open up, the more, like you said, people trust me, because they're giving me their stories that are, a lot of times, they're just so much more disturbing than mine.
Yeah.
But they trust me to hold it because they know that I've suffered like they've suffered. So it
It's a
just
big
frees
deal.
people up to be able to speak their own truth, and just be like, hey, this is safe. Air it all. Let it out.
Yeah. No, I'm with you there. Same thing. I don't think we can, you know, I think when you get to where we are, we're very confident that what we do helps.
Mhm.
And if I didn't know what I know now, like we always say, but I know the amount of people that are like, "Hey, appreciate you saying that," or "Thank you for bringing attention to that," or like what you said earlier. It means a lot to me when I hear those things, and you know that you're making a difference. And I go back and I always think about the little kids of the world right now, right?
Mm.
And I know what it was like being one of them little kids coming up, and
Mm.
when I coach and I'm around them, I ask certain questions, and there's finally one guy one day he was like, "Why you ask this question every time you see the kids during before the game?" And I go, "It lets me know who I'm going to need to lift up tonight." And
Mm.
it's just as simple, just like, and I pay attention to that. They don't know, but like I pay attention to how they respond. If kid answers the question, eyes eye to eye, heads up, he's having a good day, he's sitting there. But a kid that answers the question, kicks the can, drops his head, something's going on in his life, whether
Mm.
it's at home, whether it's at school, or whatever. And it kind of helps me just kind of help them
I
navigate.
love that you're reaching down to pull up that next generation, because I
Yeah,
think that's what it is. You men that are on your healing journeys, looking at these boys who were told, I mean, think about it. They're You boys are told, you're talked out of your emotions so young. Don't cry, men don't cry, boys don't cry.
yeah,
And I just look at how we've just wrecked the males from connecting to their emotions. And I see that changing as men like you say, no, you're allowed to feel the pain. It
yeah,
hurt. It hurt. Just connect with it, because emotions, until you emote them, meaning energy, emotion, they can't move out of your vehicle. So they just stay stuck in your body. But then, what I have my clients do is we go into the emotion. We
yeah,
go all the way in. We feel it fully until it dissolves. And then it just goes poof. I'm like, what do you feel? Oh, I feel light. Yeah,
yeah.
you
So,
do.
hey,
Because
but you do freaking
we
wait.
just moved some old, stuck, stale pain that was
Yeah,
residing in you. We moved it out. I just got goosebumps everywhere. Because every time I do that for someone else, I'm doing it for me a little bit.
yeah,
That's what I tell my husband. I'm like, this is not just them getting the benefit, it's me getting the benefit and anyone who observes it. It's just like, if you just saw how when they start their posture, their demeanor, their energy, and then once they're like, their shoulders are back, they're like engaging, they're in their body, they're like aware. It's just like that, you just don't get sick of that transformation.
no, I agree with you there. It's hard. It's it's hard to get going, and but once you find the gas pedal on this kind of work, it's hard to take your foot off of it, and you very rarely want to pump the brakes because it feels so good. And then when you do what you do and you transfer in that energy and that emotion through helping,
Mhm.
oh man, it's purpose beyond purpose.
You're doing the same thing, buddy. You're doing
Yeah,
the
I
same
appreciate it.
thing. Um, I find that depending on who's asking me the questions, like, is the direction the conversation goes. It's like you are so good at this. You're so good at directing the questions and sort of dig what and excavate what needs to be excavated in order to give the big picture and to really get the listener um to have the proper steps. Like, I
Yeah,
think that's beautiful. And you are in the healing arts, so
I
let's not
appreciate
pretend
it.
like you're not.
Yeah, thank you. Like I said, and for the audience, like Tammy and I just connected. Like we just, there's a site, and I went. It's like, hey, you want to be on the show? And then she schedules a time to be on the show. I had read her bio. She probably thinks she's coming on here and just talks about. I knew that we shared a similar background of just growing up with a childhood that was not maybe up to par with what someone would say normal everyday living, and that's
Mhm.
was my connection when I saw it. I was like, this is going to be a good conversation. She didn't know it's coming, but anyway.
See, I thought our connection was going to be the law enforcement part.
Yeah, same. Yeah, you put
Yeah.
that in your notes. Yeah, no, which is great. And but I think me and him's in a whole separate conversation, right?
Mhm.
Just I would love to talk with him sometime on and
Well,
just hear his.
if you come out this way and
Yeah,
you want to meet up, that would be so cool.
we listen. I told you before. I'll fill you in some more offline on the dates and stuff. But yeah, we're definitely coming to your
Yeah.
area. Folks, make sure you connect with Tammy. If you can't find her, reach out for me. I'll make sure I put you all together. Consumer content. And listen, this is what I'm going to tell you right now. And if you're just listening because you like Tammy and you're a friend, you're listening because you're Jeff, you like Jeff and you're his friend and you just like supporting us, I'll guarantee this. You know someone who needs to hear this episode. And I think on behalf of her, we would appreciate you sharing it with them. And you don't have to tee it up in a negative manner. You can just say, hey, Jeff asked me to share this with you, and I thought you might like it. And you can leave it from there, and we'll take it where it needs to go. But I want to thank you again. Thank you for being here, and I'm excited to continue to get to know you, hear more about your journey and where you're heading. And I appreciate you being that beacon of hope and that light that everyone needs in their life. So thank you a whole lot.
Oh, all back at you. This has been extraordinary. I just love your energy. I love what you're up to in the world. And I'm so thankful for the leadership that you don't understand, but it's rippling out and it's going to create these massive waves as they go out. So it's so much bigger than you see right now.
Yeah,
And I thank you for standing in that place. Men need you now. The boys that are going to become the leaders of this country, they need you. So
yeah.
thank you.
I appreciate you.
Mhm.